Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar. Topic that we're covering today will be around Windows Server 2008, and we have Chris Hibbert, our Strategic Solutions Director, and Melanie Wilcock, our Microsoft Licensing Specialist, here to present the content for you. And before handing over, I'm just going to run through some very quick housekeeping with you all. You will be muted throughout the webinar, but if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them via the questions box on the right-hand side of the screen. We will then have a very short Q&A session at the end where we can read out the responses. The webinar recording will be made available to you, and we will share that after the webinar. I'm just going to hand you over now to Melanie, who is going to kick off the webinar for you.
Good morning and welcome. I'm just going to cover off the agenda for this morning's webinar. So we're going to be looking at the extended security updates available, looking at Windows Server Azure Hybrid benefit and Azure reserved instances. So when products are released, they will have 5 years of mainstream support. This provides them with new features, security updates, and non-security updates. At the end of the 5 years of mainstream support, products move into extended support for a further 5 years, and they will receive security updates and non-security updates only. At the end of support, customers will no longer have access to security updates, and this is the case for anyone that still has Windows Server 2008 or 2008 R2 come the 14th of January 2020. In today's world, security updates are mission critical to every business, and we've seen many global organisations lose revenue and customers due to security and data breaches. We have also seen the introduction of GDPR in May 2018 in a bid to avoid any serious data breaches. End of support gives you the opportunity to adopt modern cloud, AI and data technologies, which can lead to an increase in operating margin, the revenue per employee and the net income on revenue. So let's take a quick look at the options available to you if you're still running Windows Server 2008 in an on-premise workload. You can choose to migrate workloads into Azure virtual machines or move to containers within Azure and benefit from extended security updates and Azure hybrid benefit. If you choose to stay on premises, you can either upgrade your version of Windows Server or purchase extended security updates at an additional cost. When migrating to Azure, you would receive extended security updates for 3 years without a requirement to have software assurance on the licenses. In addition to that, any existing licenses you do have with software assurance can make use of the Azure hybrid benefit, which could save you up to 55% on Windows Server software costs in Azure. You can then upgrade when you're ready to do so. When upgrading on-premises servers, you can upgrade to the latest version, either using new version rights if you have software assurance, or by purchasing new licenses. If you aren't able to meet the deadline of the 14th of January 2020, there are other options. You can purchase extended security updates to protect servers for an additional 3 years. Windows Server extended security updates are only available if you have software assurance on your existing Windows Server licenses and via an enterprise agreement, enterprise subscription agreement, and server and cloud enrollment only. You have the option to purchase for the duration of the first, second, and third year end of life year, and the licensing must match the underlying license. For example, if your host is currently licensed with 16 cores of Windows Server Standard, you must purchase 16 cores of Windows Server Standard extended security updates. I'm now going to pass over to Chris, who will start to cover on the options available to you.
Thanks, Mel. Hope that introduction was informative for all of you. I'm just going to jump into some of the kind of more, let's call it technical or project options that you might have open to you. So this relatively short session will hopefully explore some of the things that you could possibly do. So, what are the options? Many of you, hopefully not, could just take a leap of faith and in quotes do nothing and hope, as Mel was alluding to, there are no sort of security breaches or data breaches in your business. I guess the reason why you're on this webinar today is you actually do want to explore some options, both technical and commercial. Looking at the kind of technical options, what we have and what we typically do with customers, and one of the real insights actually is when we do a bit of discovery, is that there could be a lot of applications and hosts that we could just literally, you as a client customer, could actually just retire. So take that problem away and take it out of the estate, particularly in terms of those vulnerabilities. The one that we may come back to is if there really is that requirement to keep the platforms as is, it could be that the applications only run on Windows 2008 and to upgrade or migrate would be a bit of a challenge or too much of a challenge at this time, then the ESU option is open to you. To be clear, that's purely security updates and not feature updates that you'd get from Microsoft. The other options then would be, okay, what could we do with the hosts and the applications? Do we shift to additional physical on site or new virtual machines on site, or do we look at cloud options? All of these, available to you and would require, different strategies in both commercial and technical. The OS doesn't live on its own, so the reason you've got these servers and OSs in place is you'll be hosting or running certain applications. So typically they'll go hand in hand, and hence why, as I said earlier, 2008 may still be in your state because those applications can't necessarily be easily migrated. If you can upgrade the host, then it could just be a simple question of directing moving the application as is, which is great if it's the simplest option available to you. Or it may be the vendor has an upgrade to the new OS, and if it's an in-place upgrade after you've done the OS, which equally hopefully is relatively painless, but still requires some foresight and thought and control. Other options, which let's call them slightly more radical, could be having to re-engineer, refactor the application, or indeed look at some new alternatives, so migrating to a new service, which could equally be on-prem or in cloud. So that's the kind of state of play and the options available to you. We're here talking about end of life, but there may be other things that are driving your business to look at upgrading and servers across the estate in the data center. So it may be, the Windows 2008 question is prompting other considerations around what you need to do. The way that Bytes help our customers is initially, as I said, understanding what is out there across your estate, so a discovery exercise, and that takes kind of two forms really. One is a bit of a conversation with you to understand, what's the makeup of the business, the IT, the data centers, but equally running some tooling so we can get a deep insight into the hardware, VMs and applications that are deployed and in use. Once we collate all that information, we can then jointly make some assessment of, what is the state and size of the problem ahead of us, what potential risks are there in the business, and what other options in terms of remediation, modernization. As I said, one of those options could be we can retire this stuff, we're actually not using it or don't need to use it, or indeed those upgrade options I mentioned on the previous slide. We'll map all those things out in terms of envisioning the future, both from a technical and a commercial option. And so I think Mel equally mentioned, if you've got software assurance, you have some options in the ESU, or indeed upgrading software assurance, or you may need to buy new in terms of the underlying OSs, and or it could be an opportunity to adopt modern platforms in cloud. That modernization exercise, yes, could absolutely be to move to cloud. It could be to re-architect the app. There's certain activities that we can help you with directly. Hopefully, as many of you also know, we have quite an extensive partner ecosystem. So once we've got a plan and a vision of where we want to go, we can introduce those partners to you. From our perspective, it doesn't stop there. This is a continuing and a continuous challenge for all of our customers. So there are services we won't necessarily touch on in this webinar, but we can absolutely talk to you in the future about in terms of what can we do and what should we do to monitor and manage the estate moving forward, so we can be let's say more proactive and have more time to ensure that we're commercially managing and optimizing everything that we do. So just to add a little more detail in terms of the activities, throughout the discovery, we'll drill into exactly what hardware and virtual instances you're running, the size and throughput of data. And I'll come onto a slide later, but one of the things we typically find, particularly in virtual estates, is that they're over-provisioned, and so we can look at changing the density of those VMs, which therefore then may change the licensing requirement. I think Mel's going to maybe talk about this later in terms of how Windows Server are licensed, and so if we can reduce the number of hosts that we're using, then that could reduce your licensing footprint and costs. So we go through this exercise looking at what you're running infrastructure-wise applications, the dependency of those applications. So we can't maybe just upgrade one server if it's also linked to other parts of your estate, particularly if we're talking about moving to cloud, and some of the latency challenges that may be inherent in that shift. So it could be a bigger exercise than, as I say, just simply moving one server. As Bytes, what we look at in terms of cloud is a potential move to Azure AWS, and there are obviously other clouds available. And one of the other areas that we could also look at, if you are a VMware house, is extending your VMware into AWS. And Microsoft will announce, I think, next year, January, or later in 2020, within this part of the world, that there will be equally offering VMware on Azure as well. So the tool we use, just to introduce that, we do use other tools, but our primary tool for doing discovery and analysis on your estate is Movere. And some of you may also know that it's a tool that Microsoft, I think, required, at least absolutely funding in the channel. So there could be some options to be fully or part funded by Microsoft. We can answer those questions. But it gives us that deep insight into what's deployed, what's running, the dependencies, and equally and importantly, it also gives us, what could those workloads look like in your target cloud, with some actual right sizing around the demands on those workloads. So some real insight into what the future could look like. We don't just rely on the technology. So we equally have a bunch of technical consultants, so cloud consultants, that would review your estate and review the outputs from these tools to give you advice on potential roadmap options, and we'll equally utilize the clever people like Mel to say, okay, fine, now we've got this architecture and future sort of options, what does this look like, what are our options around licensing and therefore commercial and costs, and there'll be some, let's say, cost reduction and mitigation opportunities that, again, Mel will talk about a bit later, particularly in cloud. As I mentioned earlier, one of the key things we do look at is that kind of virtual density and over provisioning, particularly if you're going to stay on-prem. Can we reduce the physical footprint to increase or reduce your costs? But equally, if you are going to move to cloud, let's make sure we're right size first before we do that shift. As I said, typically when we run these assessments, and we do find, because with physical infrastructure, people are building that to the high watermark in terms of their business cycles, whereas cloud gives that flexibility to just build as you need it or expand or contract as you require. So just to summarize in terms of an activity, we engage on a strategic review of your environment and your business and the options available. Are you a cloud first business? Therefore, that may be the priority. Cloud first, is it AWS, is it Azure, is it another, or you're open? If it's on-prem, do we need to look at things like hyperconverge or other, DC technologies? And once you've got that, and then we can elect the right tool for your environment. So the same, Movere is just one of those options. And you may already have tools in place that we can take the data from. We'll then get a better view of the estate, look at the options in terms of doing analysis on the data collected. We'll then obviously feed those options back to the key stakeholders across your organization, to then set that path forward in terms of the appropriate roadmap, as I say, to hopefully remediate, retire or modernize or migrate the servers and applications. So that's just a bit of a whirlwind tour in terms of how Bytes engage and support our customers. And I'm going to hand back to Mel, just talk a bit more about the licensing aspects.
Thanks, Chris. So let's start by having a look at the Azure hybrid benefit. If you have current investments in Windows Server Standard and Data Center with software assurance, you can use the Azure hybrid benefit to use these in Azure. All public cloud users providers must rent the license cost of the Windows server when you provision Windows virtual machine instances at a monthly cost. But by using Azure the hybrid benefit, you could save up to 40% on your total Azure costs. So let's take a look at how Azure hybrid benefit works. With both standard and data center editions, you receive up to 2 virtual machines. This can either be 1 virtual machine with up to 16 cores or 2 virtual machines with up to 8 cores each. If you have more than 16 cores in your virtual machine, you may stack licenses. The difference between Windows Server Standard and Windows Server Data Center when using Azure Hybrid benefit is that with Windows Server Standard, you can use your licenses on premises or in Azure, and with Windows Server Data Center, you can use your licenses on premises and in Azure. So with Azure reserved instances. Reserved instances are a way of purchasing Azure-based virtual machines with the best price and flexibility in return for a commitment and upfront payment. You commit to a region, a virtual machine, and an assignment level for a 1 or 3 year upfront payment, and reserved instances can be made through all agreement types. If you pair reserved instances with Azure Hybrid benefit, you could save up to 82% on the pay-as-you-go cost. The assessments that Chris has been talking about can also help you determine which workloads could take advantage of the reserved instances. Reserved instances have also been designed to be flexible. This means you can reassign, exchange, or cancel reserved instances at any time. Reserved instances can be assigned at enrollment level or subscription level and can be reassigned at any time to a different department or the whole company. Note that reassignment can only be done under an enterprise or enterprise subscription agreement. You can exchange reserved instances for another at any time, and any time remaining will serve as a credit on the new reserved instance purchase. The new reserved instance purchase must be of equal or greater value than the pro-rated amount that will be for another full 1 or 3 year term. You can also cancel reserved instances at any time during your term, and a prorated refund will be provided back to your original payment method. If you decide to cancel, there is a 12% early termination fee applied to the prorated refund, and there is a cap on the amount of cancellations that can be done each year of up to 37,265.45 pence. So, how do reserved instances work? You purchase a reserved instance, and once a virtual machine has been spun up in Azure, it will match to a reserved instance of the same size automatically. If you have chosen to use Azure Hybrid benefit for Windows Server, or it's on a non-Windows virtual machine, there would be no additional ongoing charges in Azure. If you have chosen to pay as you go with your Windows Server license on your reserved instance, you will see the monthly charge for Windows Server as an ongoing cost. Reserved instance size flexibility is a feature that launched in August 2018 that is available for all existing and new Azure reserved virtual machine instances. With this capability, the savings of reserved instances can apply to any virtual machine size in a Microsoft designated Azure Reserved Instance virtual machine group in the same region. As a result of this feature, you no longer need to exchange or cancel your reserved instances to apply to other virtual machines in the same designated Azure Reserved Instance virtual machine group and region. So as an example, a customer purchased 10 DS8 v3 reserved instances in US East for a total of 80 cores. The initial deployment is 10 DS8 v3 virtual machines, and all reserved instances are applied. Then, during non-business hours, 4 DS8 v3 virtual machines are turned off, leaving 32 cores of reserved instances available. Those 32 cores then can be applied to any running DS v8 v3 VMs in the US East. The main benefits of reserved instance flexibility is that it increases the percentage of reserved instances and therefore reduces costs. It also reduces the number of exchanges and cancellations that may be required. Instance size flexibility is fully automated and works across all reserved instance eligible virtual machines regardless of the operating system. It also works for scoped and shared reserved instances and new and existing purchases. Azure Reserved Instance virtual machine groups are sets of virtual machines where instance size flexibility will automatically apply unused reserved instance scores to other actively running or newly deployed virtual machines within the group. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Mel. If you do have any questions about what you've heard, you can pop them in the questions box on the right-hand side of the screen. We can, well, we have the guides here. We can get them to answer. Alternatively, if you think of anything at a later date, you can email tellmemore@bytes.co.uk. We obviously can we offer sort of some one-to-one sessions with you based at your offices. If you are interested in more of a deeper dive into how we can help, please speak to your Bytes account manager. We'll share a copy of the recording round to you later today as well. So if you want to share with your colleagues, or if there was anything that you missed that you wanted to rewatch, then you can do so. So I don't think we have any questions, which is good. Everything's answered. And if you do have anything, yeah, then please just let us know. Email tellmemore@bytes.co.uk. So thank you so much, Chris and Mel, for your time today on the webinar. And thank you, everybody who joined us this morning. And I hope you all have a great day.